Welcome to the Lead Change podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mary Mulcahey. I'm an orthopedic sports medicine surgeon with a huge interest in contributing to the growth and development of leaders. On this podcast, we will share stories from physicians in various medical specialties and those in roles that support the advancement of medicine to understand the skills necessary to be an effective leader. We'll celebrate their success and hear about strategies to overcome hurdles. We will also highlight some of the unique challenges faced by women in medicine who are interested in pursuing leadership positions and the importance of mentorship, sponsorship, and allyship in achieving and being successful in those roles. Let's work together, build on shared experiences, learn from those before us, and use these lessons to propel us forward in our career. Let's lead change. Welcome everyone to the Lead Change podcast. I am very excited to share to you that this today is our 20th episode of the podcast, which will complete the first full year. So thank you everyone who's been involved, to all of our guests and everyone listening. And I'm hugely honored to have Dr. Dean Taylor on the podcast with us today for this 20th episode. Dr. Taylor is a professor of orthopedic surgery at Duke University. He graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point and Duke University School of Medicine. He completed his orthopedic surgery residency at Duke and sports medicine fellowship in a combined 2-year program at Letterman Army Institute of Research in San Francisco, followed by a year at West Point. While he was in the Army, Dr. Taylor held the position of Chief of Orthopedics, Head Team Physician, and Director of the West Point Sports Medicine Fellowship Program. Dr. Taylor retired after 24 years of service in the United States Army at the rank of Colonel. In 2006, he returned to Duke, where he held the position of Professor, Team Physician for Duke Athletics, and Chairman of the Feagin Leadership Program. Dr. Taylor is the co-founder and past General Secretary of the Magellan Orthopedic Society, past President of the Society of Military Orthopedic Surgeons, and past President of the American Orthopedic Society for Sports Medicine. Dr. Taylor retired from clinical practice during the summer of 2024, which has allowed him to follow his passion in healthcare leadership education and academics. He is the Executive Director of the Healthcare Leadership Foundation, a nonprofit corporation dedicated to transforming medical education nationally through the intentional inclusion of leadership development at all levels of medical education. I first met Dean when I interviewed for Sports Medicine Fellowship at Duke 15 years ago. I cannot believe it's been that long and how quickly time passes. So since then, we have worked together in numerous capacities through the Orthopedic Sports Medicine Societies in the United States. It has been a huge pleasure to work with and learn from Dean. I'm so excited to have him share some of the many incredible leadership lessons he has learned throughout his career. Dean, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Mary. It's a real honor to be here, and congratulations on your first year. What a thrill to be the 20th podcast and the anchor of the first year. I'm really honored. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So I know you recently retired from clinical practice. Huge congratulations. That is tremendous. Can you tell us, though, a little bit about what your clinical practice was comprised of? What was it like? What were your main areas of expertise and interest?
That's a great question. And first, I'll say that I really was fortunate in my clinical practice to be doing the things I love to do. And part of that was my interest in surgery, my interest in sports, and having interests that aligned with the mentors that I had along the way. And so my practice at West Point was purely sports medicine and general orthopedics. We did everything there. But we also had a very motivated population of cadets and staff and faculty that were very active and very competitive and had a lot of injuries. So for an orthopedic surgeon interested in sports medicine, it was a wonderful place to practice. And you have to decide at some point when you're a military physician and a military surgeon when you're going to leave. And so for me, it made sense to leave and then explore other opportunities when my daughter was getting ready to start high school, and it also corresponded to when I could retire. I'd been a colonel, and I was ready to move on, and ultimately, after a year at the University of Minnesota, which was a great year of development, and during which I was recruited to come back to Duke, where I'd gone, as you mentioned, to medical school and done my orthopedic training, to come back here 20 years ago. And my practice here was also very invested in sports medicine, but in a place where there were so many subspecialists and sub-subspecialists. The foot and ankle surgeons would look askew at me when I was doing an ankle arthroscopy or a modified Brostrom procedure, and the hand surgeons similarly when I was doing a distal biceps repair or an elbow arthroscopy. So gradually, my practice here was, at least surgically, was more focused on instabilities of the knee, instabilities of the shoulder, cartilage injuries in the knee, especially. Really pushing what we were doing in both knee and shoulder surgery and looking at the clinical outcomes. And I was fortunate enough to take care of athletes on teams at the United States Military Academy and at Duke and in Minnesota in the professional teams and really enjoyed that part of it too. And enjoyed just as much taking care of the Riverside High School athletes here in Durham, which I did for 19 years. So it's, for me, it was a great clinical career in sports medicine, and it really aligned with where my passions were.
Yeah, I love that. I think you made some great points, and it's really interesting to see how the practice kind of evolves over time, how it's influenced by your mentors, by where you are, the institution, where you are geographically, what teams there are, who you're taking care of, like that all impacts the nature of our practice. And I love too your explanation of taking care of, students at the military academy, and that is such a very unique group, and so many of my close friends in sports medicine are active duty or retired military, and so I love to hear that perspective, and all military personnel or students are all athletes, very high level athletes. And so you're right, it is a great place to be as a sports medicine surgeon to help take care of all of those people and athletes and being active in so many different ways. So very, very interesting to see that evolution over time.
It was a great military career and then a great civilian career. And the military portion of it, as you mentioned, really helped frame what I'm doing now in leadership education, and really helped me understand that every physician has a responsibility to lead, and it gave me some foundation to be able to do that better.
Yeah, that is fantastic. And Dean, I think you can actually read my mind, because I am not kidding you that the next question for you is related to this. So here we go. We'll dive in a little bit more. But before we actually focus on some of the absolutely tremendous leadership roles that you have held and currently hold, I was really hoping that you can expand a little bit more on your military experience. And as we mentioned, you graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point, and then you served in the Army for many years. And thank you so much for your service to our nation. For those who may not be aware, the military is very unique in that there is substantial leadership skills development built into all levels of military training. And Dean, I was hoping this is where you could explain to us a little bit more how that was incorporated and what you really took away from that experience.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of it on the military side. And that's probably because I've been around for a good while. I'll say that going into it from a standpoint of a naive high schooler almost 50 years ago, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. That said, the experience at West Point and a career in the Army really shaped me in terms of foundational principles. The Army has core values. It's a mnemonic leadership, LDRSHIP. And L is for loyalty, D is for duty, R is for respect, S is for selfless service, H is for honor, I, integrity, and P is for personal courage. And I think all those things, in addition to what you learn as a cadet, all those values throughout your military career become ingrained, almost second nature. And I think that gave me a foundation for being a leader while I was in the military. And then it also gave me a foundation for when I had this idea when I was getting out of the military to introduce leadership education in our fellowship at Duke 20 years ago. And I'll also say that framework of thinking about those values was really foundational, but it was insufficient for effective leadership in healthcare. And I've learned a lot of lessons along the last 20 years, most of them the hard way, have been examples of that.
Yeah, there's always a lot to learn, but certainly that set a very strong foundation, and I've always been very impressed with how that is built in, and I think that should be a model for civilian medical training and all of that. And I know you're involved with helping to implement a lot of those things at Duke, and so that's tremendous. And you touched on this, but you previously served as sports medicine fellowship director at both West Point and then at Duke. And although the institutions obviously are quite different, but what were some of your main goals as you served in that position?
Well, I think they were different. And both of them were fabulous, and such an honor to have the responsibility to shape orthopedic surgeons who are interested in sports medicine. At West Point, I had the privilege of being a fellowship director following Bob Arciero to and actually build on what Jack Ryan and Bob Arciero had created. And it was a different environment. There, for me, it was trying to figure out how we could teach the team physician skills, the surgical skills, the clinical skills, and do it in a way that benefited certainly the fellows, but also benefited the military. And what I'm very proud of is the fellows that graduated under Jack Ryan, myself, Bob Arciero, Tom DiBernardino, and the other fellowship directors after that, then went on to the medical centers and then took what they learned and really had a huge ripple effect across the Army in improving sports medicine care, because they taught the residents at those medical centers, and then those residents went out to the various treatment facilities. And you could see the difference over time. It's very impressive. Coming to Duke was a little bit different. While we had good clinical research at West Point, we did not have the infrastructure and the academic powerhouse from a medical standpoint at West Point that we had at Duke. And I was determined to have an impact coming back to Duke. And I tell this story a lot. Right before I came back, I had just read Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. It's a great book. I'd recommend it for anybody that wants to become a more effective leader. And it had an impact on me. And one of the principles in the book is figure out what you can do better than anybody else, and then doggedly stick to that. It's called the hedgehog principle. And so I was reflecting on how we could make the fellowship at Duke one of the best fellowships in the country. And I said, what can we do better than anybody else? Well, I was recruited to come back to Duke to do two things. One was to take care of the basketball team, and Coach K called me and said, let's do this together. And the other was to be the fellowship director. And I said, well, with guys like Coach K and the business school here and utilizing the resources of the American Orthopaedic Association, using my background from my military experience at West Point and all the other coaches and people at Duke, and I'm a firm believer that Duke is a place people come to be a leader in whatever their profession. Let's emphasize leadership education as part of our fellowship. And that simple idea transformed our fellowship and transformed my professional career in ways that I can't even begin to scratch the surface of in our conversation here. It's been just an amazing journey on leadership education, and I've learned a tremendous amount and have been rewarded by seeing the development in thousands of students and residents and fellows and physicians and educators along the way.
Yeah, you touched on so many great things, and we're definitely going to dig in a little bit more on some of those. So just, I guess, the difference between, and the different experiences you had being fellowship director at West Point and then fellowship director at Duke. I think one thing, though, that definitely overlaps is the impact just on the impact that you have on the fellows, and then how they go out into the world. They go to these practices and then teach residents and other fellows and other faculty, and then they're taking care of teams and they're working with coaches. And so that's a tremendous impact that you have certainly had in both of those roles. And then also, when Coach K calls, you're going to answer that call and you're going to come running. So that's fantastic. I think everyone listening is going to know how tremendous Duke's basketball team is and the impact that Coach K has had. And then you have alluded to this, though you've not said it specifically, but so being at Duke, you have created, or you were the one who created the Feagin Leadership Program. right?
Yeah. So John Feagin, I guess we have to back up a little bit.
Yes, please.
Most people listening, I hope, would know who John Feagin was. And I was very fortunate to walk in his footsteps in many, many ways. John Feagin was a 1955 graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point, like I. He was a team physician at West Point. He was on the faculty at Duke when I was a resident, retired after taking care of athletes on the U.S. ski team and Duke basketball and many, many other roles. But the thing that defined him most was he was an exemplar of healthcare leadership that brought people together to collaborate and tackle various challenges and did it in a way where everyone felt good about themselves and others. And really accomplished a lot, especially if you think clinically about his impact on the knee and specifically the ACL. When he was in practice and wrote the paper on diagnosing ACL injuries and also primary repair of ACLs, and then went on to write the crucial ligaments as a textbook. His impact was enormous. The impact that he had on people, though, that he came across was even greater. And that leadership was what we wanted to preserve in a legacy. And so after I had started this quest to introduce leadership education in the fellowship, after a year or so, I was talking with John Feagin and said, John, we're working on leadership education. What would you think if we created a leadership forum and a leadership program in honor of you? And he was over the moon excited and was our most enthusiastic supporter. And so we started with the Feagin Leadership Forum in 2009, which originally was to bring together leaders from orthopedics and sports medicine and business and athletics and the military together to learn from each other. And we quickly realized that our stakeholders, where we could have the greatest impact, was not necessarily through that forum. One of my other mentors, Bill Garrett, who was a tremendous leader in his own right at Duke and in sports medicine, he asked me, he said, so who are you trying to impact and where can you have the greatest impact? And we thought about it together and decided that the students and the residents and the fellows were least fixed in their ways and we could have the greatest impact in molding how they thought about leadership in medicine. So the next year we started the Scholars Program. And this year we have our 17th cohort of scholars. We just completed our 17th annual Feagin Leadership Forum. And it's been a tremendous journey to honor John Feagin and to still hold him up as an example of patient-centered, emotionally intelligent leadership in healthcare. John died on September 1st of 2019. And we carry on that legacy through the Feagin Leadership Program, the Feagin Scholars Program, the Feagin Forum. And at this most recent forum, John's family was there and very involved in carrying on that legacy as we explored the theme this year of leading with humanity in the age of artificial intelligence.
Oh, what a great theme. Yeah. I love that. That is an absolutely tremendous story. I have not heard kind of the evolution, and I couldn't remember exactly what year that started, but the Feagin Leadership Program is fantastic, incredibly well respected, widely known. And so for anyone listening who's not familiar, just definitely you can search online, you can find some great information, and it has had a huge, huge impact on many people. So congratulations on that and all that you've done and the tremendous commitment from everyone there to keep this legacy going. That is really fantastic. So you also previously served as the president of the Society of Military Orthopedic Surgeons, or SOMOS, as we refer to in orthopedics. So for anyone listening who may not be familiar with SOMOS, can you tell them what SOMOS is and what are some of the main objectives of the organization?
Sure. SOMOS is, I'm trying to remember how many years. I want to say that we recently had the 17th annual meeting of SOMOS, but I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that.
I won't quote you.
SOMOS was created, though, to bring together orthopedic surgeons from the three services that have medical corps, and that's the Navy, the Air Force, and the Army. And now we have international orthopedic surgeons that are military orthopedic surgeons worldwide in SOMOS. And it's become a subspecialty of its own, military orthopedic surgery. And I think when I was first starting my career in orthopedics, I'm not sure that the rest of the orthopedic community appreciated that there was specialty care for military service members and by military orthopedic surgeons. I think our experience in the Middle East changed a lot of those views. I think 9/11 changed a lot of those views. I was the president of SOMOS when I was very young, way too young. So I learned a lot from making a lot of mistakes there too. But it also connected me with a lot of people from the Navy, from the Air Force, and it continues to do so. Because of those connections, I also was able to represent the military orthopedic surgeons in a variety of ways throughout the years, including when I was on the board of counselors for the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons. One of the things I'm most proud of is serving the military orthopedic surgeons through that role by bringing the leadership of the Academy to Walter Reed while we were all gathered in Washington, D.C. for the National Orthopedic Leadership Conference. I had driven down from West Point and stopped at Walter Reed on my way to the conference. And one of my former patients was a new patient that had just arrived from Iraq via launch stool with bilateral below knee amputations. His name was Johnny Fernandez. And Johnny was a captain of our lacrosse team, and he was injured in a mortar attack. And I was able to talk to Johnny as he first got there and see the incredible care that he was getting. And then the orthopedic team at Walter Reed also showed me what they were doing in taking care of some incredibly challenging trauma cases. And Dave Polly was the chair at Walter Reed at that time, and I was so impressed by what Dave and his team were doing that when I went to the NOLC, the National Orthopedic Leadership Conference, it was all I could think about. It was very hard for me to sit through discussions at the Board of Counselors of people railing about Medicare reimbursement when I was seeing what was happening in real orthopedics and the real patient-centered focus of what was going on at Walter Reed in the care for our service members. And ultimately, I got up and I said, wait, we need to pivot here a little bit and think about why we went into orthopedics, what we want to do, and I want to tell you all about what's going on at Walter Reed. And eventually, we got the leadership of the Academy on a bus. We went there, and we did the same thing the next year. And Dan White, who was one of our fellows at West Point, I put him on the bus with the leadership, and I said, you guys take it from here. And that turned into the Extremity War Injuries Program, which has led to hundreds of millions of dollars of research funding for extremity war injury and extremity trauma. And I was fortunate enough to be invited in January to the 18th annual Extremity War Injury Symposium in D.C. and to see where this has all come and all the good that's come out of just that one little thing was a real closing the circle moment that was powerful for me because it shows what one person can do.
Yeah.
In trying to influence things for the better.
That is really incredible to hear and see how that came to be over time. And I will say too, I mean, in many other respects too, we've seen the growth of SOMOS and the partnerships that have evolved between AOSSM and SOMOS, for example, or AOSSM, ANA, and SOMOS, and collective kind of partnership to support funding for research, to support opportunities and symposia at the respective meetings. So, I mean, SOMOS is very well respected and included widely now, but as you're saying, at the beginning, it wasn't that way. And so I think it's important that you and others have helped civilian orthopedic surgeons understand how important this perspective is And that really, with the collaborations, that everyone benefits. And there's been tremendous research that has come out of this, like funding for various projects. And this is just from my perspective as a civilian, but being very close friends with many active duty and retired military. But I just have loved to see that growth over the past several years. So congratulations on your impact and being involved with many of those initiatives.
Well, thank you. I'll say that my impact has been minimal compared to many others. Craig Battani, Matt Preventure, JT Tokish, and Brett Owens, and I could go on and on of all the people that have promoted military orthopedics and sports medicine. Jim Fickey, who's the current chair at Johns Hopkins. I'm probably putting myself in hot water because
No, you're not.
everybody. But I've named some, and some people will feel left out. But there are so many people that have done so much good, and I think we're in a much better position where military orthopedic surgery is recognized as a specialty. We've had SOMOS specialty days at the Academy meeting,
Yes.
The annual meeting of SOMOS, which I've been to for the last 3 years, is just compared to where we were in 1997. And even before that, not 89 when I went to my first SOMOS meeting, to where they are now, it's been a testament to all the people that have contributed.
Yeah, and I know there have been so many, and all those that you mentioned have just contributed substantially. And so it's been fantastic to see that, to see the growth, and see the many ways in which SOMOS has impacted other fields and all the ways that we can collaborate. So you have served in several incredible leadership roles. We've touched on just a couple of them, but within and outside of your institution, you've engaged in incredibly high-level research throughout your career, and you have been absolutely instrumental in the creation of several leadership skills development programs. And we'll touch on some more as we move through the podcast. But I wonder, with all that being said, Dean, what is your main purpose and motivation in all that you do? And what is it that drives you? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
Well, it's a good question, and it's a question I think I don't think about enough, and I think a lot of people don't reflect on enough. I will say that one of the things that has helped me is something that we do in the Feagin program. Actually, we do it in pretty much all the leadership programs that we've created, and that's a values sort. And it helps me and helps everybody that does it to identify their top values. And you take a whole list of 80 values and you narrow it down to your top 4 or 5. And for me, out of that also came a leadership philosophy, which I share with people to make sure that they see that I'm aligned with that, they know what my values are, and they're holding me accountable and let me know if I'm not aligned in my behaviors to what my philosophy is and what my values are. And that helps really allow me to get to a thought process where what I'm doing is aligned with my values. And as I think about my leadership philosophy and my values, those values are love and service, their faith, their family, their adventure, their joy and passion and fun, certainly integrity and duty, and then a commitment to leadership. So those are the things that get me excited. And what I get up every morning very early right now because I'm very excited with the Healthcare Leadership Foundation, which I'm hoping we'll get a chance to talk about because that's my main passion right now.
Yeah.
And that incorporates all those values in what I'm doing and really gives me a lot of purpose and meaning because my focus right now is to make healthcare better. And my thinking on how we do that is by changing the education process at all levels in this country, especially medical education, but all of healthcare education, to not only teach the technical skills, which are important, but intentionally teach the skills that will allow people to learn to be more effective leaders and emphasize that they have a leadership responsibility. And if they learn to be better leaders and they embrace that leadership responsibility, we're going to make medicine, we're going to make healthcare better. And that's my main vision and focus.
That is fantastic. I love that. And I definitely want you to expand on it. I just want to hit on a couple of key points that you made. I really love the idea of that kind of value exercise where you're identifying what are your top values, what is important to you, and that does help you shape your why or your purpose or motivation. And that, as you said, that is kind of your guiding principle. That's your light. That's what helps you make decisions and helps you stay in line with your priorities, your mission, vision, and values. So I love people should hold us accountable, right? I love that. So we want everyone to know what is it that drives you, what is it that drives me, and to hold us accountable for that. So that helps guide everything that we're doing and how we're guiding our team too. And you brought this up, we mentioned in the introduction, but I would love for you to expand on this role. This is the Healthcare Leadership Foundation. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about how this came to be, when you started this, and what are some of the main initiatives that you're working on through this program right now?
Yeah, thank you. Because like I said, that's what I'm really passionate about now. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. It goes back to the Feagin program. And it goes back to that idea. What can we do better than anybody else? And leadership education, and then the Feagin program accelerated this idea in my mind and in the minds of many people that were part of the Feagin program, that we need to be doing this at a larger scale than we are. Give you a little bit of background on the Feagin program. The Scholars program is a year-long immersion in leadership development, and the scholars have executive coaches. They're put into teams that have team projects. They have didactic sessions. We have a trip to Annapolis every year, and their capstone event is the forum, which still brings together all those leaders from the different disciplines to share ideas, but it's also where the scholars present their team projects. And so the Scholars program has been the incubator and catalyst for a lot of leadership initiatives. One example is the Duke School of Medicine has the Leadership Education and Development curriculum, and that was a Scholars project. We didn't have a model for teaching leadership in healthcare. We were using business models. They were good, but not good enough for what we needed in healthcare. So we came up through scholars' work in their team projects, we came up with the healthcare leadership model. And that's the framework we use for teaching that patient-centeredness is a core principle of leadership in healthcare. It's necessary but not sufficient. I can give you lots of examples of bad behavior that have been justified based on, I'm doing it for the patient, and that breaks down the team. And then the competencies that we teach to are foundational competencies of integrity and service, and then teamwork and critical thinking. And then at the top is emotional intelligence. It's the keystone. It's at the top of the model for a reason. And I think that using that framework to teach skills has allowed us to really expand what we've been doing, both in the Feagin program, in the School of Medicine, and then when we've taken leadership initiatives to other places at Duke, and then when our alumni have taken them to other places and started programs. For example, John Kelly came to the Feagin program early on and one of our speakers, and he went back to Penn and started the Penn Orthopaedic Leadership Academy. And I'm speaking there later this week. BOLD program, which is the AOSSM's program for its early career members, is patterned largely after the Feagin Leadership Program. An immersion in leadership development. It's held over 2 years instead of 1 year, but it still has executive coaching. It still has team projects. And through all these programs, we now have a network of educators and coaches and alumni and program participants and other people affiliated with all these programs, that we have a community that's dedicated to teaching leadership skills. I've made a lot of mistakes in 20 years of doing this, and I know how important it is. And so last year in July, we brought together some of our really passionate healthcare educators that were dedicated to leadership in healthcare. And we decided we were going to scale what we were doing and really leverage the community. So in July, we started the Healthcare Leadership Foundation, which is a company dedicated, a nonprofit company dedicated to scaling leadership education across all levels, across the country and internationally. And we are in the midst of building the community where we'll have an online, interactive, innovative platform that brings everybody together in this mission. And we share in that responsibility of delivering the content, the services, the advising, create a membership network and community to be able to teach those skills, those hard to learn soft skills that people talk about, the interpersonal skills that people that want to learn to be more effective leaders will enable them to do so. And HLF is still in its formative stages. We're at 9 months, and we are in the midst of building pilot programs for medical schools, in partnership and collaboratively, not prescriptively, collaboratively. We should come to Loyola.
Yes, please do.
And we're already in the midst of doing that, and some are being delivered now. One to an orthopedic group in Florida, and a couple to residency programs, a couple to fellowship programs. We're working with medical schools on establishing those programs, and our website's online, healthcareleadershipfoundation.org. And I'd encourage everybody to go check it out.
Check it out.
Because we are within the next month or two, we will have an online platform that will bring together the community to get the flywheel going, to really make the impact that we see, so that we can scale all those lessons learned from the Feagin Leadership Program and the LEAD curriculum and the BOLD program and many, many others in ways that will change medical education, change healthcare education in this country, so that we can get to better care, to attack the challenges, the constantly changing challenges that are out there.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to do.
Wow. Well, that is incredible. And there's been an amazing foundation laid with many of the programs that you've touched on, and you just hit on a lot of really, really important points. Part of that too is that they're the pillars, right? Well defined pillars of this sort of creating the foundation of leadership, including emotional intelligence and other factors, and that it's really important to have that very well-rounded perspective. And you also mentioned, and I think this is absolutely foundational, and was part of my motivation, quite frankly, for creating this podcast, was that as physicians, we are all leaders. Absolutely. We are all leaders, regardless of whether or not you hold a title, right? As a physician, you are a leader. You're a leader of your team in the clinic, in the operating room. You know, maybe you're teaching medical students or residents. You're a leader, certainly in the eyes of our patients. And so I think it is absolutely critical that we have these skills to be effective leaders and to be successful and to be able to have an impact and guide our teams, help lead our patients through sometimes very challenging situations. And so that is really fantastic, the impact that the Healthcare Leadership Foundation will have on helping to share these leadership skills with all different levels too, you know, from medical students and residents and fellows, and because it really is the foundation of everything that we do in medicine. And we don't talk about it very much because we're talking about, right, understandably for us, all right, ACL reconstruction and rotator cuff repair and you know, how do we repair the labrum for shoulder instability? And those things are very important, but we haven't, for much of the time, talked a lot about the critical skills of being an effective leader. And so I love that you are doing that work now, and I can't wait to see how this continues to evolve. And I would love if we could have some opportunity to collaborate at Loyola, and so we'll certainly explore that more.
Well, Mary, you're already on the HLF bus, whether you like it or not. You're part of it. You're doing the good work, you know, and you're right. All physicians are leaders, whether they like it or not. Two questions for you.
Please.
One, can we make sure that the link to this podcast is on the HLF website? So that it's out there for everybody, because what you're doing is exactly what we're talking about. Collaboratively working to improve healthcare leadership. And you're doing a great job of it. The other question is, can I promote another podcast on your podcast?
For sure, absolutely. Like, we want to share as many resources as we can.
Because it just came out this week that a podcast I did with a neurosurgeon, Dr. Leon Moores, who's in the D.C. area, used to be in the military, it's just come out, and we talk about leadership in his context. And he's written a book called All Physicians Lead, APL. And actually now he says, a better term is all people lead. And the sooner that we recognize that, the better off that we're all going to be. Because if we understand that we all are leading, and we have to go back to the definition that we use for healthcare leadership, is the ability to influence others for the benefit of patients and patient populations. And with that definition, certainly everybody can lead, everybody can influence, whether it's somebody that's cleaning the floors, whether it's a medical student, all the way up to the CEO of the health system. And if we understand that and emphasize that responsibility at all levels, then we're going to be much better off. Because one thing that I've learned as I've been trying to teach leadership skills is that you can't teach leadership, and you can't teach leadership skills to people that don't want to learn. So one of the major requirements for learning to be a more effective leader, and we all have some innate skills, and we all have leadership roles and responsibilities, and we all have the ability to get better. I'm a big believer that leadership skills can be learned, but only if you want to learn them. We have to learn the technical skills. We have to learn the anatomy. We have to learn, if you're an orthopedic surgeon, you have to learn how to use your instruments to do the operation correctly. Otherwise, you're not going to be certified. The real tragedy for me, the disappointing thing that's almost incomprehensible, is that we don't have to learn how to effectively lead and interact with patients, with our teams, with other specialties and other specialists. It's equally important, but we don't have to do it. It's not assessed. And it's a recent realization of mine that not only do you have to want to learn to lead, I think as a community of healthcare providers and people in healthcare, we have to somehow change the system so it's not just that you want to, it's that you have to learn the skills to be a more effective leader. Otherwise, you're not going to pass through medical school, you're not going to pass through residency, and you're not going to be credentialed to take care of your fellow human beings. And I think that's an important thing that HLF is going to move us closer towards.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic goal. And because, as we were mentioning, it is so critical to everything that we do, every single day, every interaction. Being an effective leader, being able to help guide our teams and our patients is fundamental to what we do. And also, I loved that you said, it's not necessarily an innate skill, but the key thing is that it can be learned, right? And that you grow and evolve. And even for you, for people like us that are very committed to it, you're still learning every day. I'm still learning every day. I learn so much from this podcast. I learn all the time. And so absolutely these skills can be learned. Now, I wanted to ask you, I know we're nearing the end and I could just talk to you for hours. And
this is such a great time. And you're doing such a great job of really promoting leadership in healthcare and yeah, let's keep talking.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you just one question about AOSSM, because this also is such a critical role, but just one question. So from 2023 to 2024, you served as president of the American Orthopaedic Society of Sports Medicine, AOSSM. Huge congratulations on that tremendous and very, very well-deserved honor. I just wanted to ask you, what did you, or do you, frankly, want your legacy to be through AOSSM?
I guess it's pretty easy. It's aligned with what we were just talking about. I want my legacy for AOSSM to be one of physician leaders embracing their responsibility as surgeons, as team physicians, as members of the sports medicine community to make sports medicine better. Whether that's the changes that we made for our early career members and introducing things like the BOLD program, whether it's enhancing the journals and building the of journals that we have for AOSSM in a way that improves the quality of research that's delivered to the sports medicine community, whether it's just the team that is something that over the last 5 years we've been able to build that provides a foundation for the great leaders to come to build off of. That's what I want my legacy to be. And I have seen this organization grow tremendously based in, frankly, it's cliche, but we all stand on the shoulders of the giants that came before us.
For sure.
Being able to contribute even a little bit to making the society better has been a real honor.
Yeah, I love that. I want to round out this absolutely tremendous discussion with a few questions that I like to ask all of my guests. So first, this podcast is called Lead Change, and I wonder, Dean, what does lead change mean to you?
So lead change to me is an invitation to look for opportunities in chaos. And that's the story of HLF. HLF came out of the chaos of the financial emergencies that academic medical centers and many in healthcare faced 2025. And everyone was concerned that, and they had existential concerns that research, that care delivery, that the educational process was going to be underfunded and people were going to lose jobs, and they did. And in that chaos, looking for opportunity led to the creation of the Healthcare Leadership Foundation, because what better time to start something that would lead to more effective physician leadership than when you have a crisis in leadership in healthcare. So that's what lead change means to me, and it's in line with there's a great book called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. And so looking to embrace those lessons learned in the obstacles and the challenges and looking for opportunities, I think is something that for me, when you say lead change, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think, as leaders, certainly change is inevitable. That is going to happen. Change and chaos and maybe interrelated. And it's how we deal with that, right? So, and seeing it as something to embrace and to see it as an opportunity, right, is definitely a lot more productive way to kind of face that. And you have really exemplified that by creating this great company and these initiatives, and we'll see the large impact that will have on the field, as we move forward. You already highlighted a few great leadership books, but I'd love to ask this too. And are there any other leadership books that you'd love to mention in terms of ones that have been particularly impactful for you?
Yeah, I'll refer people to the Feagin website. We got a ton of books and articles and videos and lots of resources there. I like biographies. So one of the great biographies on leadership is Doris Kearns Goodwin's book about Abraham Lincoln called Team of Rivals. I highly recommend that one. I mentioned Good to Great. I mentioned All Physicians Lead. There's a book by a physician named Ron Epstein called Attending, which is kind of a play on words about attending. In other words, being present, but at the same time being an attending in the medical setting. Yeah. And then I also mentioned Ryan Holiday, who I really like his writings. And in addition to The Obstacle is the Way, he's written a book called Right Thing, Right Now. And I think that's a great read as well. And those are shorter reads. Team of Rivals is not.
It is not just to have everybody be prepared.
But it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
But those are all such great recommendations. And I love too, you're one of just a couple of guests on the podcast so far that have recommended biographies as a great way to learn about leadership. And so I love that. That's definitely a different perspective to have. And I personally have not read biographies with that intent in mind, but I am really intrigued by this. And my last question for you, Dean, is do you have any favorite quotes?
Yeah, I might get emotional on some of these, but I'll give you three. First one it's a little bit, this was preceded Ryan Holiday, but we talked a lot about John Feagin, and John Feagin had a leadership mantra, and it was do the right thing at the right times for the right reason. And that's a mantra that we live to in all our leadership education programs. It's a mantra to aspire to. I'm not sure we can always reach that aspirational goal, but that's a good one. I really love Teddy Roosevelt's quote that Jim Urbanek, our chairman and one of my mentors, would use all the time, that people won't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I really like that one.
It's fantastic.
And then the last one kind of goes along with that. Maya Angelou's famous quote that people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And I think those are great words to live by and to aspire to.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are fantastic, and I think raises really a key point of leadership and just life and being a good person, is that genuinely caring about the people around you, showing interest in what they do, supporting them in their aspirations, that has a tremendous impact.
So, I was lucky enough to go to West Point with a lot of smart people, a lot of talented people. And when we graduated, you'd wonder where they'd end up. Well, three of my classmates ended up becoming 4-star generals. Highest rank you could be in the Army. One of them was the Chief of Staff of the Army, Jimmy McConville. One was the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, Dan Allen. One was the commander of all the forces in the Pacific, Bob Brown, who actually also played basketball for Coach K. And when they were cadets, you never would have predicted that they would have been 4-star generals. And when we got together one time as a class, we were talking about why did these guys become 4-star generals? And the conclusion was, one, they learned all the things to be good technically and commanders in the military. They had that technical expertise, but so did a lot of people. But the thing that differentiated them, especially as they got into higher ranks, was that they cared. They cared about other people. And when you went back to our cadet days, you could see that in them then, and that was the differentiator that separated them throughout their lives. So I think your point about the importance of caring for your fellow humans in a way that's appropriate and compassionate and empathetic is a huge differentiator in who can be a good doc and who can be a great doc.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that example, the story that you shared. Thank you. So, Dean, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I have absolutely loved every minute of this conversation, and I truly could talk to you for another hour easily. We've just barely scratched the surface of the many incredible things you've done, the teams you've led, and the impactful initiatives that you've helped develop. I definitely want to have you back on the podcast, as I said, and we'll do it as soon as AOSSM and do a live episode there. Thank you for your many contributions to orthopedic sports medicine and leadership skills development. I really appreciate you sharing your insight and some of the many incredible leadership lessons you've learned throughout your career. I look forward to many, many more opportunities to work together, and just thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Mary. It's been an honor, and I'm looking forward to year 2 and many more podcasts from which I can learn.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right.